I am so tired of coming on this podcast every single week and telling you to stop playing T.Y. Hilton. Like, just stop it.
Mikey needs help.
Mikey needs help.
I was like, if you don't have Jeff Wilson in here, and if you don't run it on first down, I'm going to strangle you through that TV.
You should know better than everyone else. That fool tears you up when you plays you.
Yeah, but
Don't you want him on your team?
I have him at number 25.
Thank you. Fine. Todd's the reasonable one on this show.
I take issue with everything he said there.
Well,
I really do.
DeAndre Swift. He's going to break them tackles, son.
That's bold. That's bold. That's putting your nuts on the table right there.
Hey, there's the first time for everything.
Waxing poetic over here with Todd Diamond.
Dude's old.
So what? He's not as old as Brady, and you're jerking him off before the show starts.
I have Sutton in my top 10. I have him at number 9. Yes.
You know what? I'm just canceling the league. I can't do this with you guys.
All right, guys, it's August. We have a draft date in the books. We have our first preseason game tomorrow. And, of course, Eric's birthday is coming up here in this month as well. Oh, man, a lot going on. Welcome to the MHA Podcast. Eric Lansing online with Todd Diamond and Mike Renault. Football is here, gentlemen.
Yes, finally. Football. It's going to be great.
Less than 24 hours away before the first preseason game, the Hall of Fame game. Is that going to be on Peacock? Because I'm going to be incredibly upset if it's on Peacock.
No, it's not.
No, I think it's on Fox, so you're okay.
You know why? Because the NFL does it correctly. And the Olympics don't know what they're doing.
All right.
How you guys doing? You guys doing all right?
Yeah.
Doing all right. Just
It's
watching
Wednesday
some-
night. We're all a little
Yeah.
peeved about different things. Todd's
Yeah.
doing all right. I guess he's mad at work, but
Yeah, but
Whatever.
that's normal. That's normal.
fantasy football should cheer us up, right?
But I'll say this. This is because the last few days I was like how work was, but looking forward to this makes it worth it. So it's all good.
Yep. Draft date on a Sunday night, September 5th. So that should be exciting. We'll have a majority of the owners. We're not going to have everybody. Some people are being very selfish and going on their honeymoon. Joe Vaccarelli. I'm just kidding. No, it's great for him. He's going to go to Hawaii, so that should be fun. And yeah, so draft date, always a fun time. And what are we going to talk about on this week's show? We'll finish up our running backs talk. We didn't get to all the running backs, so we'll start things off with that, and then we'll get into some wide receivers, of course, some MHA trivia, and now for some news.
To me, the most amazing thing about the news is that whatever goes on in the world, it exactly fits the number of pages that they're using in the paper that day. Interesting contract.
And one of that piece of news to get things going here is a quarterback that Mikey was kind of high on, and he's going to be sidelined for 5 to 12 weeks, and that's Carson Wentz, the new Colts QB dealing with an old foot injury. I guess the story on ESPN says his foot was already broken, and as he was practicing, a bone came loose.
Oh,
Yikes. So the new quarterback in place will either be Jacob Eason, Sam Ellinger, or Brett Hundley. All right, Colts offense ready to roll. Mikey, I'm sure if any of them are better than the other in those quarterback situations, but obviously what excites us about fantasy is the offensive line and the great running game. Are you going to move those running backs down knowing that, an unproven quarterback is going to be behind center?
I think you have to just a little bit because it's not just Carson Wentz. It's Quentin Nelson has the same injury.
Same
And that's-
injury.
Yeah, it's their best offensive lineman. So both of them had the bone come loose in their foot. They said with Nelson, he was actually born with it like that.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, so yeah, now they're missing their top lineman too. So I think you have to move Jonathan Taylor down just a little bit, or as Todd says, a smidge.
All right, more news. Amari Cooper dealing with an ankle injury. He is on the PUP list. Now, that doesn't mean that he'll be definitely gone for 6 weeks. They're just throwing him on there so they can add more people on the roster and add a replacement on the roster. He won't start practicing until 2 weeks into the preseason, so not much of a training camp for him. Does this lower Cooper behind? Does this lower Cooper behind CeeDee Lamb in your rankings? A lot of people have them pretty close with Cooper ahead, but for Mikey, does that move CeeDee Lamb above Cooper?
Here's the funny thing: like, I wasn't like fully aware of the status of the Cooper entry, and I had CeeDee Lamb over him anyway.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I already like Lamb better than Cooper, so yeah, I do.
Well, that should be fun to talk about as we get into our wide receiver talk. Todd, same question.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously I forgot to rank CeeDee Lamb, but I had Cooper at number 11. I mean, obviously they're just going to be cautious with it, and that's fine. But I still have Cooper ranked. I'd have Cooper ranked ahead of CeeDee Lamb. Just a little bit of that, sophomore slump, a little bit for CeeDee Lamb. I think Cooper is just more of he's Dak Prescott's safety blanket a little bit. So I would have Cooper ranked a little bit higher than CeeDee Lamb.
All right. So a couple last notes here. Devontae Parker for the Miami Dolphins wide receiver. He's also on the PUP list. Will Fuller getting some reps early here. Parker could fall in the depth chart. He's obviously kind of tailed off the last couple of years in terms of fantasy. Jalen Waddle may get some more reps and get into that starting lineup, so keep an eye on that. We talked about the incredible abilities of Nick Chubb on the last show, and I think Browns management tuned in because we definitely liked him, and so they rewarded him with a 3-year contract extension worth $36 million. $20 million of that is guaranteed. Chubb is 29 years old, but doesn't show any signs of slowing down. Eagles first-round pick, Devonta Smith, out 2 to 3 weeks with an injury. And that's always tough as a rookie because then you're missing time getting reps out there on the field. And something I saw today, Julio Jones has missed the last couple practices with an undisclosed injury. I guess on Monday he landed awkwardly during practice. So something else to keep an eye on, and we'll talk about Julio in depth as we go through here. But before we get into the wide receivers, we got to finish our running backs talk. And so, guys, to talk about Colts running back, Nyheim Hines is a guy I wanted to ask you guys about. Out of these pass-catching running backs, who should we keep an eye on as the draft moves along? Obviously, it's a full PPR league, so these guys can definitely come into play and do some good work as a running back too, or a flex position. But out of these guys, and we'll start with Todd first, J.D. McKissick, Chase Edmonds, Nyheim Hines, and James White, all guys that are capable of catching the ball out of the backfield. Todd, out of those guys, who would you prefer?
Chase Edmonds. Just more of the eye test, because when he came in to kind of spill, this is probably 2 years ago, spill David Johnson, he was a little bit more dynamic, out of the backfield a little bit faster, per se. So he kind of has that, that speed factor. I like that a little bit. And the offense that he's in, I mean, James White, obviously I've drafted him enough times, but, I don't know, with the quarterback situation, if it's really going to be Cam, as much as they say it's going to be Cam, or it's going to be Mac Jones. Like I said, Hines, with Carson Wentz being out and their best offensive lineman, I'm not really even going to, Jonathan Taylor was the only one, just because he definitely showed flashes last year and really stepped up. McKesson, I'm just JD McKesson. There we go. I like Antonio Gibson better. I think Gibson's probably going to be the workhorse, so he might just come in, on third down. So, not really worried about that. But I think Chase Edmonds might be the starting running back. Might be the back that they lean on more compared to James Conner, who gets hurt a lot. I know, Eric, you can attest to that a lot. And so I think Edmonds I would go with over those other three running backs.
What says you, Miguel, about these pass-catching running backs?
I'll make it pretty simple. Todd's right with Edmonds, and the reason why is when you look at James White and J.D. McKissick and Nyheim Hines, those guys are strictly receiving running backs, and Edmonds actually has an opportunity to get carries while those other three don't. So I would go with Edmonds.
Yeah, he was definitely the favorite of the bunch for me, but I would keep an eye on Hines even despite the offensive woes that are going on, because I think if you have a backup or a third string quarterback running things, they'll dip it off to or dump it off to those running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield. So Hines might be becoming useful sooner rather than later. I know James White dealt with his dad passing away mid-season, and that could always be a problem. So you're not sure you're going to get with that. So I think Edmonds, you're right. I think I know when Mike and I were talking about it, he doesn't look like a back that can be a 3-down back. And I know they have James Conner over there to help spell him every once in a while. But we've seen how just athletic James Conner is. And I think Chase Edmonds has him beat still in that category, even though he doesn't look like it. So I'm with you on the Chase Edmonds thing. All right, so backfield battles. So these guys are from the same team, and I just want you guys to give me your favorite of the bunch. So we'll start with Mikey. Out of the Houston backfield, they're going to be sporting David Johnson, Phillip Lindsay, and Mark Ingram. Todd or Mikey, who should owners be drafting first?
Oh boy,
Don't
definitely
like any
not.
of them?
Well, definitely not Mark Ingram. He should be retired. David Johnson's kind of on his last legs. I mean, he did okay last year. I guess I'm going to give it by default to David Johnson. I feel like he's probably going to get the most carries. Lindsey's kind of like a sleeper type dark horse, but safe wise, I'm going to go with David Johnson.
Todd, you had David Johnson on your team last year, went off to an incredible start. Phillip Lindsay, he's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder because that's how he plays. Mark Ingram, I think he could fall in for a touchdown or two. That's probably what he does best. But who do you like out of this bunch?
Oh, David Johnson all day long. Mark Ingram, yeah, agree with Mike. He should be done. And Phillip Lindsay, obviously we saw enough of Phillip Lindsay here in Denver, but David Johnson's still I think he's the more versatile back that you want. You're not saying that Phillip Lindsay can't run
Versatile.
Versatile.
He's that good to be called versatile. I mean, he caught 33 passes.
I know. Maybe versatile is more in his heyday, but out of those other three, it's David Johnson, and like I said, by default, yeah, I'd probably say by default, but David Johnson would still be the back I would choose.
I agree that David Johnson should be drafted first.
Mm-hmm.
However, I feel like if me drafting, I would probably wait on Phillip Lindsay because he's a better value.
Mm-hmm.
I think, or at least in terms of where you're drafting him and based on the guys that are around him.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like Phillip Lindsay could pay off more than David Johnson could. Let's go to another situation. I know all these are just not fun running backs to talk about, but in a world where you don't have enough running backs, you kind of have to mention them. So Todd, the New England backfield, Damian Harris, James White, Sony Michel, Ramondre Stevenson. Who should owners draft first?
Ooh, those are an awesome
inspiring bunch, isn't it?
I know, right, man? Just sign him up, Canton all the way. I would actually go with Damian Harris, just because he like I said, talking about versatile backs. He's a bigger back, but he can catch passes out of the backfield. James White only comes in on third downs. Sony Michel has a problem, fumbling sometimes, so you don't see a lot of him. And the Stevenson guy, much as college football as I watch, I've never heard of this guy, so I'll go with Damian Harris. And this one I'll go by default.
Not a default talk in this conversation. Mikey, who's the best guy? Who do you think is going to score the most fantasy points for this season?
Well, I disagree with Todd as far as, Damian Harris being any sort of receiving threat. He's not really all that versatile at all. He only had 5 catches last year, so I got to disagree there. This is really tough. Harris is probably going to get the majority of the carries, but I'm actually going to go, despite my rankings, and go with James White here, just thinking of a bounce back. Like, when I truly think about it, I agree with what you said in the previous set of running backs. Like, this is one where you would wait and get the value in White versus, getting Harris at an earlier spot where he may not be worth it, because he's not going to score a lot of touchdowns with Cam Newton being there. That's just not going to happen. So I
get
would
him
go
on the PPR points.
Yeah, I would go for White.
All right, we'll keep going here. The Jets backfield. I can just see Mikey rolling his eyes right now as we go through these. But Michael Carter, who is their highly touted draft pick, and Tevin Coleman. You love Tevin Coleman, right?
I do. Not. Yeah, I'm going to go with Michael Carter. I mean, I think by now we know what Tevin Coleman is, and he is not a good fantasy player. So I'm going to go with Michael Carter. Looked pretty explosive in North Carolina. I think he'll probably end up being the starter out of camp. At least that's what I'm hoping for. So I'm going to go with him.
Todd, you on the North Carolina train as well?
Yeah, because I've been on the Tevin Coleman train, and that train's not very good. So, Michael Carter again, just by default again. Again that whole Jets offense is just going to be just brand new, so you don't know what you. I mean, it's kind of I guess you could say if you could find that unicorn, that James Robinson type running back that just comes out of nowhere and plays well. But yeah, that again, it's Jets offense, gross.
Yeah, I like what I saw from Michael Carter just on tape, so I would definitely take the chance over Tevin Coleman. Let's go to the backfield battle between James Robinson, as Todd just mentioned, and Travis Etienne Jr. Who should owners be drafting first there, Todd?
James Robinson. I mean,
really?
I know Travis Etienne is that flashy, player, and he's got the speed and, what he's done. But the last time I checked, James Robinson is not broken. Why wouldn't you not? I don't know. Why would you not go? Why wouldn't you not go with the? I mean, obviously, it's only his second year, but go with already a proven product that just came out of nowhere and just wowed everybody. In fact, he wasn't even drafted. I said I saw enough Travis Etienne. He freaking torched Miami to the ends of the earth, but I'd go with James Robinson. And the thing too is you don't know yet how they're gonna use him too. Because I mean they're both kind of similar a little bit. I mean James Robinson's a little bit more between the tackles a little bit compared to Travis Etienne, but I'd go with James Robinson. Already he's ready to go. But who knows? Obviously it's a whole new coaching staff, new regime, all that stuff. But yeah, I might as well go with the proven product already.
Interesting how fantasy football works. We argued last year that James Robinson might be the MVP just to the fact that he wasn't drafted, gets picked up by G, has an incredible season of 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, 49 receptions, 3 receiving touchdowns, and now Travis Etienne, because he's the shiny new object that people are, from what can tell, that people are drafting him first. Are you doing the same thing, Miguel? Or are you going to go back to the James Robinson well?
I think I have to go Etienne. And
wow.
He's got a lot of Kamara to his game when you watch him on film. But that's not why. See, my concern, I agree with what Todd said. James Robinson may not be broken, but you're dealing with a whole nother animal with Urban Meyer here. I was reading today, like, what they're doing down in Jacksonville is they're having, like, these one-on-one drills in training camp, and they're keeping score and announcing, like, which player wins the one-on-one matchups, like, over the speakers during training camp. And basically Urban Meyer says he's doing a thing where we're keeping score, and whoever has more wins in one-on-ones will make the team, and whoever has more losses gets cut.
Unbelievable.
Oh, I saw that.
One and done from Urban Meyer, folks.
Yeah.
Let's just say it now.
Yeah.
You can't take anything that any of these guys did for Jacksonville last year. Like, this is just a whole new – it's like the Chip Kelly thing all over again, like where – this college coach comes in, thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and they drafted Etienne in the first round. I just don't see any way that he's not playing more snaps than James Robinson.
Yeah, well, Urban Meyer better be careful because he might not be able to call do anything, make any more decisions if he does this. This is not college. This is the NFL. You're dealing with grown adults here, grown men, and you were saying that they were keeping. Wow, yeah. Eric might be right. This might be one and pulling that kind of stuff. Yeah, you get punched in the face for that, but that's a different story.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say, because I mean, what Mikey says is definitely something that owners should keep an eye on. The thing I'll say, though, is production leads to carries, right? Production gets you on the field.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that Travis Etienne can't be productive, but we've seen James Robinson be productive, and maybe he doesn't get the carries early. But once those 0-1, 0-2, 0-3 records start jumping on the board, and then they have to bring Robinson in, even though it's not their guy, man, I mean, it's a tough decision. Because Etienne, from what he did in college, was quite impressive. I don't know. I think I would just wait for Robinson as opposed to spending an early pick on Etienne. In my honest opinion, I don't have anything to do with anything with the Jacksonville offense because you have no idea what's going on. I mean, other than just it sounds very college-like, and I understand you bring in a college coach. Sometimes those things don't pan out. A lot of the times they don't pan out.
And he brought in Carlos Hyde's guy from Ohio State too.
Yeah, Tim Tebow. Yeah, so see? He's got an ego. It's stay away from Jags. That's my opinion. Keep going here. We have one more, and then we'll kind of get to the wide receiver talk. But Mikey, the 49ers backfield might be a little more sexy than what we've been talking about. But Raheem Mostert, Trey Sermon, or Jeff Wilson Jr., out of those guys, who should be, or who do you think is going to be the guy that most owners should keep an eye on as we get closer to draft date?
Well, keep an eye on Trey Sermon. I love Trey Sermon. But Mostert's probably the most likely, so long as he stays healthy, to be the number one guy there that gets the most points. So, but he better watch out because I like Trey Sermon, and I think the 49ers do too. So, yeah, keep an eye on that guy.
Todd, what about you?
Yeah, Mostert for me, just really by default. I mean, Jeff Wilson, I mean, take goal line carries away every once in a while. And, Trey Sermon, I don't know. I'm not really high on him. Yeah, he had his he was good at Ohio State. Saw enough of those games, but yeah, Mostert for me. It's and be honest with you, I really don't even want to touch the 49ers backfield at this point.
So we kind of wanted to do another board bet, kind of similar to what we did with the rookie quarterbacks, but which rookie running back do you guys think will end up with the most points? Mikey, you like Trey Sermon. Do you think he's going to be the guy?
No, he won't be the guy. It'll be Najee Harris, just with the volume alone that Pittsburgh's going to give him. There's nobody else in that backfield that can compete with him for carries, and he doesn't have to worry about a quarterback running either. So, yep, it's going to be Najee Harris.
Same for you, Todd. Do you want to go with Harris or someone else?
You know what? Just to make it interesting, because I see Harris, but let's go with Javonte Williams for the Broncos. Why not? Make it interesting.
But is it by default?
Well, I mean, I could have. I could have said. I agree with. I think it ultimately will be Harris, but you know what? Just to make the board bet interesting, because if we said Harris, then it's not really a board bet.
You will accumulate the points over the year, but it's up to you. If you want, I'm going to go different. So if you want to go different, you can go different. I'm not going to tell you who to pick.
You know what? Let me just go with Harris because that's what I originally wanted to go with anyway.
That's fine. You can definitely go with Harris.
All right.
I'm going to go with Michael Carter. Okay. I know touchdowns will be hard to come by in that offense, but I like what I see from him, so I'm going to give Michael Carter from the Jets because I liked what I saw him on the board bet. That might be difficult to reach, but I think he's capable of at least putting up decent numbers. All right, let's get into some wide receiver talk. We're finished with running backs. Let's get into the guys that we saw last year. And now, time for some MHA trivia.
If my answers frighten you, Vincent, then you should cease asking scary questions.
I'm going to take it.
And of course, it'll feature some wide receivers. So, Davante Adams was the number one scoring wide receiver during the 2020 season. In fact, Mikey said on one of the podcasts at the end of the year that it was one of the best seasons we've ever seen from a wide receiver in MHA history. But was it the best season of all time? Based on our scoring system, did Davante Adams score the most points in a single season? Either give me yes or no, both of you.
No.
I'll say no.
Very good. You both get a point. It was not the highest scoring single season by a wide receiver in our league. I'm just going to write this down. Hey, you just hold on a second. You just hold on.
Oh, sorry.
One thing at a time.
All right. You want an
Okay.
update on the game?
Fine. What's the update on the game?
All right. It's 31-23 Australia.
Good. Beat the United States. Put it on a better channel next time. Okay. So this is going to be the question. Who are the highest scoring single season leaders in MHA history? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here.
Okay.
And if somehow we end up in a tie, because you both got a point, you both could still split. I'll have a question. I'll have a tie-breaking question. So I'll start off with, since Todd jumped out and said, I know what it is, I'm going to give Mikey a chance to answer the first one. And Mikey might not know it. So you don't have to give me the year or the amount of points. You just have to give me the player's name. So out of the top 5, who had the highest single season MHA point scoring season? Mikey?
Well, I'm going to go with Calvin Johnson, only because I know one of those years he broke the receiving yards record in the season. So I'll go.
I'm sorry,
there.
that is incorrect. He is not among the top 5, which was surprising. And maybe I have to go back and check that, but he was not one of the top scoring. And maybe you can check that as we go along, but he was not amongst the top 5. And actually, it's going to be top 4 because Davante Adams was 5th. So it'll be the top 4. Todd, you said you seem to know?
Yes. Randy Moss.
Very good. He was the number 1. He had 304 points in 2007. I have the numbers here. I just have to scroll down to get it. So in 2007, Randy Moss had 98 receptions, 1,493 yards receiving, and 23 touchdowns.
Golly.
23.
Dang.
23. That's how incredible that was. All right, Mikey. So give me any of the other 3 to try to get a point back here. Todd's got 2.
Oh, this is tough.
I had a different question altogether, and then I just went on a different route when I was putting together the outline today. So I went through every single season and looked at the top scoring. Now the 2002 and 2003, I had to actually manually, because they didn't have the actual point totals for those 2 years. So just give me a name, and I hope that pans out for you. Because a lot of these guys have done it more than once.
Let's go.
So who's number 2?
I'll go Terrell Owens.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's incorrect. He was not in the top 5. So Randy Moss had 304 points. Davante Adams in 2020 had 284 points. So there was 3 guys with higher point totals. Todd, your turn. You can take a big lead here.
I'll go with Antonio Brown.
That is correct. In 2014, 296 points. He had 129 receptions, close to 1,700 yards, and 13 touchdowns. Goodness gracious. That's a big year. All right, back to you, Mikey. There are 2 more on the board here. 2 other names on the board that were better than Davante Adams. Both of these guys had multiple seasons where they were the number 1 overall wide receiver.
I'll go with Julio.
I'm sorry, Julio never made it as a top wide receiver, or at least the top scoring wide receiver in our league. Back to you, Todd, and you could finish this off with getting one of those 2 names.
I'll go with Marvin Harrison.
Correct. Marvin Harrison in 2002 had 295 points. 143 receptions, 1,700 yards receiving, and 11 touchdowns. And the other guy who is already on this list, Randy Moss, had 203 points. Or excuse me, in 2003, had 292 points. So some pretty amazing numbers on the list. So Todd, congratulations. You won MHA Trivia this week.
Woo! Yeah.
Now here's just a fun question I'm going to throw, and you guys could just answer at will. But in the entire MHA history of wide receivers scoring the top amount of points, how many guys did it in back-to-back years?
Calvin Johnson was on. Calvin Johnson.
No, Calvin Johnson was not one of them. He was the top scoring wide receiver in 2011. He had 96 receptions, 1,600 yards receiving, and 16 touchdowns.
Oh,
but he did not
didn't
ever do it again. Go ahead.
Antonio Brown?
Yes, Antonio Brown, 2014 and 2015. And there was one other guy we haven't mentioned yet. He did it during the 2008 and 2009 seasons.
2009.
I've got no idea.
Wow.
Reggie Wayne?
No, I'm sorry. Reggie Wayne, at least not from 2002 to 2020. Andre Johnson.
Oh.
And yeah, he had a year of 115 receptions, 1,500 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Pretty close to similar numbers. Here's a name that I had no idea that finished as a top wide receiver in the league. Steve Smith.
Steve Smith.
In 2005, had 252 points. He had 103 receptions, 1,600 yards, close to 1,600 yards and 12 touchdowns. How about Muhsin Muhammad in 2004? That's when Eric won a championship because I traded for him. 93 receptions, had 16 touchdowns. Joe Horn was second that year.
Wow.
So just some off-brand guys. Brandon Marshall did it one year, except he did it with Chicago. That was his best year as a pro. And Demaryius Thomas in 2013. How about Jordy Nelson in 2016? Ah, yes, wide receivers. Let's get into this.
All right.
So, talking about who the top-ranked wide receiver going into this year, is it still Davante Adams? Or should people think about drafting Tyreek Hill? We mentioned only twice in the entire league or entire history of the league that a guy has done it twice in a row. Can Davante Adams do it twice in a row, Miguel?
I think so. I mean, with Rodgers coming back, he's still going to be the top target, and we've seen what he can do the past couple of years when he stays healthy. You know, they're looking to go out at Green Bay together and in their last stand there. So, yeah, I think they're going to go out there and try and light it up. So, yeah, I think he's number one.
Is it even close? Like, should Adams be far and away the number one guy, or should there be a conversation about why Tyreek Hill should be the number one guy?
No, it's close. I mean, I think Adams, Hopkins, and Tyreek Hill, I think it's close, but I just have Adams above.
All right, Todd, what do you think? Is it Davante Adams by a long shot, or is Tyreek Hill in that conversation, or maybe you have Tyreek Hill over Adams?
No, it's Adams all the way. It's not even close. It's not even close because the fact of the matter is teams, double team, triple, and Rodgers still force feeds him the football, and still it's not even close because you got to think about it. With Tyreek Hill, you have Travis Kelce. Who's the other wide receiver really in Green Bay? It's Aaron Jones, if anything. But other than that, who else is there in Green Bay? They don't like drafting.
Robert Tonyan had 10 touchdowns, I believe, last year, and so
yeah, but it's still not even close. I mean, because apparently they don't like drafting wide receivers in Green Bay. So no,
they got Randall Cobb back.
Yeah, it's not moving the needle for me. But
Tonyan had 11 touchdowns. My mistake. Go ahead, Todd.
But it's not even close. It's not even close because the fact of the matter, he still gets him the ball. It's not even close.
I think it is close. I understand what you guys are saying. And I mean, Mikey said he was close. I mean, I understand he outscored him by almost 40 points. But I mean, he had 18 touchdowns. That's going to be a tough number to reach again. I'm not saying they couldn't do it, but if you're asking me how much, if I'm going to bank money, it's going to be less than 18. I mean, Tyreek Hill had a really good touchdown year too. but he's also had 58 touchdowns in 74 career games. He knows how to find the back of the end zone. And he was third in the NFL with 23 red zone targets. That's a pretty good number. So, I mean, they're both great quarterbacks, and Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, and I just don't think it's as far as way. I mean, Davante Adams, it's hard to have an all-time great season. So to have him to do it again, I think he'll come back down. I think it'll be more around the 13 to 14 touchdown. It was just a couple of years ago that Davante Adams was human, right? I mean, I remember because I drafted him, and he was in the first round, and he wasn't that good. In fact, he only had 83 receptions, 5 touchdowns. And then he goes from 5 to 18. Things had to go right for them last year. It's hard to put up 18 touchdowns. So I think it's closer. And Hill could overtake him. And I don't think it would be a super crazy surprise, at least on my end. I mean, Adams did lead the NFL with a 28% target share rate, which is hard to match. But, they're on their way out. Who knows what that coaching staff does? Moving on to the next talk, and we'll get to a bunch of guys here, and we're not going to finish wide receivers, by the way. We'll have to finish that on the next show, and perhaps we do that on the tight end show, or if we just don't get through all the wide receivers, we'll just do another wide receiver show. But on to the next question. Calvin Ridley without Julio Jones. Julio Jones out of the picture in Atlanta. He's over in Tennessee. Calvin Ridley has been quite the wide receiver since his rookie year. He scored 10 touchdowns in his rookie year. Todd, what are your thoughts on Calvin Ridley and this Atlanta offense?
I think now it's finally this might be Calvin Ridley's team now, at least for the wide receivers. This what he showed in the last few seasons, even with Julio there. Obviously, Julio has had the injuries and everything, but Calvin Ridley's on a different level. He's definitely trying to put his mark as one of the best wide receivers in the league. So, if Calvin Ridley's there for me in this, in the second round, I would take him. So, yeah. There's like I said, just talking about the Davante Adams, there's nobody really else now, in Atlanta, Russell Gage, that doesn't really. Again, it's not moving the needle for me either. So, again, who else is there when there's not another clear-cut weapon on the team? All those targets, all those catches and yards are going to one person, and I think that's going to be Calvin Ridley. So, I'm definitely high on Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, you guys have him both 4th overall in your rankings. Mikey, he'll have to be the guy. Can he be the guy with, Julio out of the picture? And we saw Atlanta's offense, I don't know, be stifled a little bit more in the second half than the first half. But can Calvin Ridley, I don't know, get away from the double teams without Julio? That means he's going to see the better wide receiver. And Julio did miss some games, so there are some stats without him there. But, Calvin Ridley at 4, you're pretty high on him.
Yeah, he already proved he could. Like, Julio basically wasn't there last year. And Ridley did fine without him. So I don't think that's going to be too much of an adjustment. I like the fact that they've got in a new head coach that's more of an offensive coach that should help things out. And hey, Atlanta, they're going to be down in a lot of games. Their defense is still going to be terrible. They're going to have to throw the ball. So yeah, I love Ridley. I don't think Todd mentioned, they don't have anybody else there except maybe now Kyle Pitts. Yeah, I think Ridley's going to be really, really good again.
Ridley had 143 targets last year, 93 in his sophomore year, 92 in his rookie year. Touchdown machine. He's averaged 8 touchdowns over the last 3 years. And the 8 full games he played without Julio last year, he averaged 11 targets, 7 receptions, and 107 yards. So definitely shown what he could do. Any thoughts, you guys? You guys are obviously super high on Russell Gage, but is he a guy that could be a number 3 wide receiver, or should owners just ignore him altogether? Mikey, go for it.
He's waiver fodder.
Wow, no kidding, huh?
So if you're desperate and there's a matchup there, go for it, but I don't really think you should draft him.
I don't even think you have him ranked in your top 70.
I sure don't.
Todd, you want to mention anything about Gage?
No. I'm good. I'd rather at this point, like I said, I know if there was anybody else, but Kyle Pitts is probably going to be. I mean, obviously he's a tight end, but he's if anything, he's the second option there. But no, that's at that point. If you're only looking, if you have Russell Gage on your season, definitely took a turn that you didn't like. So
I think you're being kind of hard on him. I mean, he had 72 receptions and 109 targets. I think he wants. I think they want to put him outside. He played most of the season in the slot. He played the last few weeks of the season on the outside and produced 3 top 20 weeks. And this is such a silly stat, but I'm going to say it just because I'm trying to make my point. But in those weeks from 14 to 17, if you extrapolated his stats for a full year, it was a 140 target, 90 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That's not going to happen. But it seems like he could be someone they can rely on. And, tight ends and how quickly they turn into productive members of the fantasy world, it takes a while, if at all. And if Mikey is what he's saying is true, and which I agree with him, that the defense is going to stink, they're going to have to throw the ball. And I think Russell Gage shouldn't be overlooked. That's just one guy's opinion. Go ahead.
So if you take, somebody that had 4 good games at the end of the season, then what you have is T.Y. Hilton. Draft away.
Oh, come on.
very good.
Oh my goodness, that's funny, but I don't agree with that. Let's talk about some guys that had spectacular 2020 seasons. Can they do it again here in 2021? And we'll start off with a guy that could be argued was one of the fantasy MVPs, and of course, I was on G's team once again, who was just the draft whisperer, I guess, last year. Stephon Diggs, drafted in the 7th round. He would end up finishing 3rd overall in the MHA. I believe both you guys have him pretty high up in your rankings for obvious reasons, but 247 points, that's such a big number. Todd, can he do it again?
Yeah, he definitely showed because I thought when he left Minnesota to go to Buffalo, thinking, he's going from inside of a dome to outside. Definitely, affects wide receivers a little bit when you've always been playing a lot of your games in a dome. And actually, again, I was in my rankings. I thought I have Stephon Diggs number 2. Actually, I have Hill 3. But can Stephon Diggs do it again? I think absolutely can, because I think that Buffalo team is definitely it turned that corner really well. The fact of what Stephon Diggs put up, and that was Josh Allen's go-to wide receiver. Yes, he will repeat what he did last year. I think even he did 1,500 yards last year. He might even get 16 this year. So I think he might even have a better season than he did last year. Because I think it's just the way that Buffalo team is going to be and how that offense is going to operate this year.
Wow, Todd gave us a respectable yardage or point total. He didn't go, he could have 2,000 yards receiving. He actually just went up about 75 yards. He was okay with that.
Yeah. Hey, I'm learning. I have my moments, but yeah, I mean, because it's just the way too. It also helps too. At the end of the day too, the fact that Josh Allen, definitely turning that corner, so that helps too. But I think Stephon Diggs, he goes for 1,600 yards or more.
Mikey, 166 targets led the NFL. That is a high number. Can they do that again? Is that a number they can reach? Do you think that's going to regress at all and he's going to come down in his 127 receptions? Or do you feel like that based on the other weapons on the squad or based on how good Josh Allen is getting in his young career, is that a number that he can reach again?
Well, it would have to regress, right? They got Emmanuel Sanders now.
Oh, yeah, whatever. I was looking at the depth charts on the Buffalo Bills today, and he's actually the number 2 wide receiver, so take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, there's an extra game in there, too, so that's going to help his cause as far as getting back to that number. Now, 166 is an incredibly high number, So I don't know if he gets necessarily back to that. But the one area I think he could improve is he only had 8 touchdowns. And, for somebody that gets the type of volume he gets, he can get into double figures with that. At least I think so. So that can improve. He's just so consistent. He had 9 games last year where he had at least 8 receptions, which is incredible. So, yeah, I think he needs to be right back up there. I think I have him 5th. I think he's going to be right back up there again.
Yeah, touchdowns have never really been a problem for this guy. He's averaged 8 touchdowns the last 4 years, 8 touchdowns per season the last 4 years. And talk about his playoffs, too. In 3 games, he had 20 receptions, 311 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he continued the ball even after the season was over. So I have him ranked 3rd in my ranking. So he's going to go in that 2nd round, maybe or late 1st if someone really likes him. But he's a guy that owners should keep an eye on. We'll keep moving on here. Another guy that was just incredible, and that was DK Metcalf, a guy that was high on before the season started. And Aaron drafted him and paired him up with Russell Wilson. And boy, that was a tough duo to have to face on a weekly basis as an opponent. So Mikey, he finished 7th in our league last year. He had 10 touchdown receptions in just a sophomore year. What do you think about DK Metcalf going into 2021?
I think he's still going to be strong now. He faded a little bit down the stretch as the Seahawks kind of did too. So there's some worry there, but they've got a new OC in there now. Their offensive line's still a concern. So, I think Seattle's going to still be a high-powered offense. So I like Metcalf. It was his breakout season, and I think it'll only continue.
Todd, DK Metcalf?
Oh, absolutely. I'm high on him. That dude looks. Again, the comparisons of what he is. He looks like Terrell Owens and Randy Moss all fused into one. So, like I said, high powered. The way that offense was operating last year, 10 touchdowns. That's what they have him projected. ESPN has him projected for this upcoming season. He at least gets 15. I think they're giving him a disservice. Only 1,200 yard, 1,293. Yeah, it's gonna at least be 14 at least for DK Metcalf. I think that's a little. They're lowballing him just a little bit on that.
Mikey mentioned his struggles down the stretch. He had just 1 touchdown catch the last 6 games of the regular season. Had 0 100 games. 100-yard games in the last 5 games as well. And really all season long, 83 receptions, not a bad number, but it's not an elite number. His receptions had him in 17th out of all the wide receivers, and he was just 14th in target because, he definitely could rack up the yards on 1 catch, and he had 10 touchdowns. Did you guys know that Tyler Lockett, who I'm going to ask you about here in a second, had more fantasy points than DK Metcalf last year? Does that surprise you, Mikey?
It doesn't surprise me.
You had him, right?
I had him, but see, here's the thing about Tyler Lockett. His numbers are fake. Okay? I'm just going to come out and say it.
Wait a minute. How can they be fake? They count, right? Is there some weird Marvel world where his stats don't count? They disappear after Doctor Strange comes in and just wipes them out?
No, but I'm going to tell you why you don't want him. So he had more points than Metcalf, but I'd rather have Metcalf all day. And here's why. Because Tyler Lockett's going to give you 4 tremendous weeks where they're going to be game-winning weeks. He's going to get you 20 to 40 points in those weeks. And then the rest of the time, he's not worth starting. But those weeks put him at the top of the standings for the season. They're fake baloney numbers, all right? It's not real.
Fake baloney numbers.
Baloney.
So there's real baloney, and what's fake baloney?
Yeah,
what's that made of? Maybe I don't want to know what fake baloney is.
You don't want to know what real baloney is either.
Yeah.
What Mikey's referring to is that last year he had 9 games with 5 receptions or less. He had just 2 touchdowns the last 6 games of the season, and both of those came in week 17 when it didn't matter. He had a majority of his points came in 3 games. He had 8 touchdowns in 3 games, and 10 games with 0 touchdowns. So interesting. He had 132 targets, 100 receptions, 10 touchdowns. So Todd, I mean, it's a silly question, but lock it over DK Metcalf?
Not a chance in hell. Oh, no.
Oh my gosh, I'm just looking at Mikey's list right now and has Lockett 24th overall. And wow, Todd has him 22nd. I have him ranked 11th.
Don't
So
believe.
I guess I'm the Tyler Lockett guy right now.
Don't believe the hype, Eric. It's all.
Well,
You have to. It's context. So you just see a
Right.
number and you're like, wow, like man, this is a great number. But dig deep into it, and then you'll discover what's actually behind that number.
Sure. He has averaged 9 touchdowns the last 3 years.
Yeah,
And
and
more
he's
targets, more receptions, and more touchdowns.
the dude had 47 targets in 3 games. You know how ridiculous that is?
That is pretty ridiculous. But I mean, that was 1 year. I mean, he's been a pretty consistent wide receiver. I think 20. You guys are lowballing him a little bit. I
He's just
get
not-
it.
he's
You
not
had
my-
him. The sting is on you. I think that's a little too low. We got to keep moving
It's
on.
not my type.
Not your type. Here's a guy that's not Mikey's type, but definitely Todd's type. Justin Jefferson, a guy who in his rookie year, 88 receptions, 1,400 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And so Todd has him ranked 6th overall. And Mikey, going down his list, 17th. Mikey, why are you hating on Justin Jefferson?
I don't think I'm hating on him. Like 17th,
That's pretty low compared-
that's really
that's-
good.
That's low compared to the experts, is what I'm saying.
Todd's an expert.
Supposedly we're allowed. I'm supposed to say yes because I put him on the podcast. But even like in the magazine I'm looking at currently, they have Justin Jefferson ranked 6th.
Yeah, it's awful high.
And ESPN has him ranked 8th for the list in front of me.
Yeah, it's awful high.
So
He was pretty good last year, but I don't know. Just top 10. I don't know if I'm ready to go there yet. I got to see some more, and maybe I'm missing something. I mean, he was really good down the stretch, but
like he even had 2 bad games when he was still figuring it out and was still able to put up. He finished 9th overall in our points scoring.
yeah,
Mikey's just not a believer, or at
it's
least
not a believer.
not willing to
It's just
draft him that high.
I'm not willing to say he's like elite. You know, that's all. He's a great player, but I'm just not going to that level yet.
Todd, what do you think about him? He had a ridiculous 70% catch rate last year, averaged close to 16 yards per reception. Things seem to look similar to last year in terms of what that offense is going to bring to the table. So
Yeah.
Why are you high on him?
I mean, a combination of me punishing myself for not accepting the trade that Dylan offered me for him. But I just, I always go back to what Aaron kind of says too, when he looks at players is, the eye test and what he did. I mean, he obviously got to be careful to sophomore slumps. Cause that, those are sometimes, I don't want to say guaranteed, but those do creep up and, you don't know, but he showed enough. He showed enough, in that offense, for me to rank him at number 6. So, he's you can put him on the outside, the inside, everything in between. So that's one of the reasons why I have him ranked high as I do.
Moving along here, a guy that was on Todd's team and definitely showed frustration throughout the entire season, although he put up decent numbers, was Davante Johnson. Is he the number 1 guy in Pittsburgh, Todd?
I think so, and the reason I say it is just because a combination of, Juju has been hurt, injuries kind of plague him a little bit too as well, but Juju can have a case of the dropsies a little bit too, and get frustrated.
Juju or Deontay?
Juju.
Well, let's not forget that Deontay Johnson had 14 drops last year.
Had some fumbles too.
Speaking of the dropsies.
Yeah, but the thing is, Big Ben still went to him. Yes, I granted that's a big number. That's a big number, 14 drops. But I think I don't know. Juju just seems like he kind of loses a step a little bit, and I just think as much as Deontay Johnson has his struggles, I think he might be. I think he's starting. I think he's gonna be. I think he's gonna be the guy. I think he's gonna lead the team out of that wide receiver core between him, Juju, and Claypool. When it comes to a lot of the categories. So, and again, obviously, these guys say it all the time. I'm loyal to my players, but
Mikey, do you remember when Todd was bitching about Deontay Johnson every week?
I do. Every week.
yes, but
Now, there was a couple situations. I mean, he played 15 games. He left a couple of those early due to injuries. So I could hear that frustration. Go ahead.
But at least in some of those games he left early, he got some touchdowns before he left.
I'm just trying to wonder why Todd is hell bent on trying to put back together a team for him that didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah, that could be a whole different show. For with Juju coming back, I know Todd said he's lost a step. You guys know that Juju is only 24 years old? Like, he's still a young man. I don't know if it's he still had 97 receptions last year. He had 9 touchdowns. I'm not saying that he should be drafted over Deontay Johnson. I don't think we should forget about him either. How would you rank those guys, Mikey, Johnson, Schuster, and Claypool?
I had Johnson first. I just like the targets. I mean, you talk about he played one less game than Juju, left some games early. Dude still had 144 targets, which is incredible. Yeah. Probably should have caught a lot more than he did because he only had 88 catches out of those. But so I think that can improve. Chase Claypool, I think, is going to have a bigger jump. Like, he had some pretty monster games too last year. Wasn't as consistent as the other two guys. But I think this is where he's going to kind of break out this year.
So still in that order, though. So if it's Johnson, Juju, and Claypool.
I have Johnson, Claypool, Juju.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had it that situation. My mistake.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Deontay Johnson, just some stats on him. He led the team with close to 25% target share, 10 of 12 games, or 10 of 12 full games that he played in. He had 10 or more targets, which is just incredible. And Juju had his worst yard per catch. Now, I think that was just because more of the situation and then Big Ben and his arm kind of falling off. His 8.6 yards per catch were his worst of his career, where he had 13.1 yards per catch in the previous season. I read something today that he is trying to play more on the outside, but I just don't see how that's going to happen with Claypool and Johnson on the outside. He's just something he's going to have to deal with. And he's on another contract year because he tried to go out and find a better deal or a better situation. And Pittsburgh, he ended up coming back for Pittsburgh one more year. And I think it could be quite the interesting duo where it could kind of go back and forth all year. But Big Ben's got to be better.
Yes.
We saw those pictures where he's lost weight and is supposed to be way better shape. But it's got to be his accuracy and his decision making, and the running game is gonna help if Najee Harris pans out. But yeah, that should be a fun bunch. I think you could have all 3 of these guys, or all 3 of these guys could be on fantasy teams, and they could be quite productive. All right, so now we kind of move from injured guys. Wow, we're actually probably over now. This will be the last segment, then we'll have to go. From injured to good to go here in 2021. Thoughts on these guys? Julio Jones, who in Atlanta his whole career. We all remember the draft day where they traded a bunch to trade up. Atlanta to trade up in that draft to pick him. And last year played 9 games, 51 receptions, 771 yards, 3 touchdowns. He averaged just 12 fantasy points per game. Mikey, Julio Jones, where do you have him? Should he be a guy that people should draft early on, or maybe it's a guy they should wait on? And obviously that just depends on how other people think about him. But how are you feeling about Julio Jones?
I've got him ranked 10th. Like, if the guy's healthy, I mean, you have to take him in the top 10. Like he's Julio Jones. You know what he does. Like he's going to a new team, yes, but it's going to be a team that already has another great receiver there, that they've got a decent enough quarterback, with a good team around him, with Derrick Henry too. I think if he's there, there's no reason why he can't be old Julio getting his 150 targets and 1,400 some odd yards. It's just my belief.
Mikey. He's old Julio, all right. He's already hurt now. I understand that what he's done in the past. He's also in a situation where they don't throw that often. They're one of the least throwing teams in the league because they go to Derrick Henry first, and then you have another guy named A.J. Brown. Tannehill threw a career-high 33 touchdowns last year. Can he do that again?
He's definitely got the weapons. Definitely got the weapons.
Sure. But I don't know if that helps. I mean, he was 18th. Tannehill was 18th in total pass attempts. Matt Ryan was first because they had to throw a lot over there in Atlanta. Todd, your thoughts on Julio?
Yeah, I mean, I have him ranked 15th on my rankings. Injury, that's the biggest thing. I mean, he can produce on field. Obviously, one Achilles heel was the fact. I mean, he got the yards and the receptions, but the touchdowns for whatever reason were hard to come by to some degree. Wouldn't put up double digits, touchdowns, every single year. But it's just the injury. But again, Julio's one of those, the high risk, high rewards. I mean, if he can stay healthy and he can produce, then yeah, he's one of the best wide receivers in the league. But the fact of the matter is, injuries has plagued him, and it's harder to if he's there, but if he gets injured and you don't I don't know, injuries is the biggest thing, and that's kind of it's tough. It's tough when when you don't know, because if you draft him very high, if you draft him high like Mikey has him at 10, and he gets injured, that's going to be tough. That's going to, unless you go wide receiver with your first two picks, then okay, fine. Then you have have another number one wide receiver. But if Julio is your number one wide receiver and he gets injured, that's going to be rough.
Yeah, he just played 9 games, as I mentioned, last year. But before that, he played 15 games, then 16, 16, 16, and 14. So he's been pretty healthy for the most part. But, I mean, as you get older, he dealt with hamstring issues all year. He tried to come back, and he would, suffer a setback. And he is in 17. So he averaged 12 points per game because he left a bunch of games last year. If you go 7 full games where he played every down, or at least majority of the downs, he averaged 19 fantasy points per game. He's one of those tough guys that are hard to look at. I am just gut wise. I have him 19th. That could obviously move up as we go along, but I kind of agree with Todd where if you're taking a risk, taking this guy as a number one guy, I think there's so many better options to take that chance on, especially if he's going to be a number 2 back. If you're drafting him, and I guess I could look at Mikey's rankings. I know we're running out of time here. I mean, you do have A.J. Brown over Julio, but 9 and 10. So you figure the passing going to be fruitful in Tennessee.
Yeah, I think everything's going to be fruitful in Tennessee.
All right. And I know I skipped a section. We skipped can these guys rebound from a down 2020, but we'll start things off with that. Last guy we're going to talk about before we get out of here in terms of injured guys coming back here in 2021. Actually, we have 2 more guys, and we'll try and make this quick. Odell Beckham Jr. missed 9 games last year, torn ACL. Just played in 4 games in 2018. Todd, your thoughts on Odell Beckham Jr. in Cleveland now?
Yeah, I mean, again, OBJ is another one of those guys, that, injuries, but also too with him, another thing that hurts him too is, and whether it's reality or fantasy, his attitude. He's got a little bit of an attitude, because when he doesn't get his way, he starts hitting, kicking goalpost, kicking net.
Gosh, Todd, that was so long ago.
I know, but I'm just saying. But still,
You mention it every time you mention Odell.
but that's hey. I'm just saying. It might rear its ugly head sometimes, and just saying. But at the end of the day, the way that Cleveland offense is, if he can stay healthy, and he's got a great quarterback to throw him the ball, so you would think why not? But again, that's another one of those guys. Like, are you willing to take a risk on as your number one guy? And I don't think
anybody's drafting him as a number one wide receiver. I mean, you have him ranked in the 20s, 24.
Mm-hmm.
Mike has him 20th. I have him 26th. I don't think anybody's like going top 12. If we got 12 teams in the league, no one's drafting him as a top 12 guy.
Yeah, but even then, I don't know. I mean, even then, it's you never know in our league. You never know. It's always surprises every year on draft day, so you never know. I mean, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole, but.
Oh, Todd, I love listening. Last year, in games he played, 9 fantasy points per game, just 2 touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns and 4 receptions versus Dallas. In those 7 games he played before he got hurt, he had 5 receptions or less. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, or maybe it was an injury that eventually got him. I'm not real sure. Browns rushed 4th most in the league, 495 attempts. Cleveland threw 501 times, which is 28th. I mean, I guess, can Odell be the number one guy, Miguel, or is it worth him? Is it to be a number 3 guy, or do you see him as a flex guy?
He could be the number 1 guy in Cleveland.
Is that enough to be interesting at all?
Look,
I mean, you have him 20th, so that's something.
This is pretty simple. Like, he's a top 10 talent, but in the situation he's in Cleveland, where they're just so run heavy, and they should be, because that's what they're good at, and they have 2 great backs. I just don't see him being a number 1 wide receiver in fantasy.
Number 2?
He could be a 2.
Okay. I mean, his last decent season came in 2018. 77 receptions, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns. It's been a while since he had an amazing season where he had 101 receptions in 2016 and 10 touchdowns. So we'll see how it goes. I don't know if he constitutes a wild card or a lottery ticket type of guy if you're drafting him in the 20s. But I don't know. I mean, we'll see if Baker Mayfield takes a step forward.
He's just a guy, though, that, like, even if his week-to-week numbers aren't what you deem they should be, like, he's different than most because he could have, like, that blow-up spot. Similar to Lockett.
Yeah, and you have him pretty close to Lockett, as we heard. Last guy, and we got to get out of here. Todd, Courtland Sutton, go.
Yeah, obviously coming off an injury,
You're gonna have him ranked 9th overall like you did last year?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I have him ranked number 35th overall.
Whoa!
I know, right? And that's just more to see, depending on how the quarterback situation is going to be. But obviously Sutton, before he got injured, definitely showed he can be a top guy. But let's see how he is coming off injury. So, he may, see how preseason goes. How much he plays there. He might move up my rankings, but right now I have him 35th in my rankings.
Mikey also has him 35th overall, and I asked you guys, who would you rather draft? Because I think it's an interesting situation considering how well Jerry Jeudy played last year, and I asked if you prefer Sutton or Jeudy. And Mikey, what'd you say on your list here?
Well, there's a caveat to my list, so
I love it.
It just all depends on who the quarterback is. So if Bridgewater,
Todd Diamond,
yeah, if it's Bridgewater, then I like Jeudy. But if it's Locke, I like Sutton.
But what if it's Todd? What if he's the starting quarterback?
If it's Todd, I'm not drafting either one.
Attaboy. So why would you go that way? What's the difference in their games that you would prefer one over the other based on the QB?
Well, I mean, Sutton already kind of showed that chemistry back in 2019 with Drew Lock, and Lock's more of the throw it downfield where the big guy can go up and get it. He's got that chemistry already, whereas I just believe with Bridgewater, who's more of the short throws over the middle type stuff, that plays more into what Jerry Jeudy does as a route runner.
don't know. It could be Jerry Jeudy, depending on which quarterback ends up starting. Just some quick stats on Sutton. He only played one game last year, 3 receptions on 6 targets for 66 yards. In 2019, he kind of had an incredible, I think it was a sophomore year, 16 games, 72 receptions, 124 targets, 1,100 yards, close to 15.5 yards per catch and 6 touchdowns. I like Sutton over Jeudy either way. And I think it's just more, I think the talent, I mean, they're both incredible talents, and it would be so great if, in my opinion, Drew Lock takes that step forward. It makes them both fantasy relevant, but I'll take my chances with Sutton first. Mikey, do you want to say something?
I said the other thing that worries me a little bit with Sutton is he's right now, he has a giant knee brace on because he's still kind of struggling to come back from the ACL tear. So,
gosh, really? I mean, it happened like week 1.
Yeah.
Should he be better by now?
You'd figure, but so,
Oh, wow.
in
So
camp,
yeah.
I've heard he's got a gigantic brace that he's wearing and he's struggling a little bit. So, hey, he could start slow. So you never know.
Yeah, that's definitely, and I guess we're going to see it on Friday. I guess we're going to Broncos training camp. I guess we'll get to see that knee brace up close and personal. Todd, are you going to be able to contain yourself when we go here on Friday?
Yeah, so I'll be able to contain myself. Okay, I'll tell him like, hey, I'll have my rankings. Like, hey, this is where I have you ranked.
I hate you, Cortland Sutton. 35th overall. I hate you. And
Yeah.
just for the record, Todd has Jerry Jeudy over Cortland Sutton, 27 for Jeudy and 35th for Sutton. All right, so that'll be part 1 of wide receivers. We have a lot to go in terms of wide receivers. I don't know if we'll get to the tight ends on that next show, but I'll type up. I feel like we're not going to get to a tight end on that episode. So we'll kind of see. There's going to be obviously a lot more news as we get closer. I feel like every time I'm reading something new or doing research, I find some new information. That Julio Jones news came up today, and so that ate up a lot of this segment. So I think we'll probably stick to wide receivers, and we'll do a tight end show with accompanied by something else, maybe like a mock draft or something. But gentlemen, thanks for coming on this Wednesday night, talking some wide receivers, and we'll catch you guys on the next show. I guess I'll catch you over at Broncos training camp.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fantastic.
Sounds good. For Mikey Renault, Todd Diamond, I'm Eric Lansing. We'll see you next time on the MHA Podcast.